The gravedigger's niece collapsed beside the freshest mound of earth, just as the sun reached its merciless peak over Alamosa, Colorado, in the summer of 1878. Her dress stained brown from digging holes for the dead since before dawn. Nadine Walker was 21 years old and looked like the earth itself had claimed her. Dirt caked under her fingernails, smudged across her cheekbones, ground into the fabric of her mourning dress until she could not remember what color it had been when new. Her uncle Ezra had taken her in 7 years ago when both her parents succumbed to influenza, and she had been repaying that debt ever since with a shovel in her hands and the smell of fresh turned soil permanently embedded in her skin. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving another streak of dirt, and stared at the 6 graves she had helped prepare that week alone. Alamosa was not a large town, tucked into the San Luis Valley with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising dark and imposing to the east. But it seemed death visited with regularity that kept her uncle's business profitable and her hands raw. The latest grave belonged to a rancher who had been kicked by his horse, and Nadine had spent 3 hours that morning making sure the hole was deep enough, wide enough, proper enough for a man who had left behind a wife and 4 children. "That is enough for today," her uncle said, appearing beside her with his perpetual grimace. Ezra Walker was a man who seemed to have been born old, his face creased with lines that spoke of decades spent in the company of grief. "Go wash yourself at the creek before you come back to the house. You look like something I should be burying." Nadine nodded, too tired to feel the sting of his words. She gathered her things and walked toward the edge of town, where Alamosa Creek ran cold and clear from the mountains. The walk took 20 minutes, and by the time she reached the water, her legs trembled with exhaustion. She knelt beside the creek and splashed water on her face, watching the dirt swirl away in brown clouds. She scrubbed at her hands, her arms, but the dirt was stubborn, worked into every crease and crevice. She did not hear the man approach until his shadow fell across the water. Nadine looked up, her heart lurching, and found herself staring at a man who looked like he had been carved from the mountains themselves. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to block out the sun, his chest and arms thick with muscle that strained against the fabric of his worn shirt. His hair fell past his shoulders, dark brown and tied back with a leather cord, and his face was all hard angles covered by several days' worth of beard. His eyes were the color of the creek water, that peculiar blue-green that changed with the light, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice deep and rough like gravel underfoot. "I was checking my traps upstream and saw you there." Nadine scrambled to her feet, suddenly aware of how she must look, covered in dirt and exhaustion. "I was just washing," she said, the words coming out defensive. The man stepped closer, and she could see the details of him now. The muscles in his forearms, corded and strong, the breadth of his hands, the way he moved with a careful grace despite his size, like a bear that knew its own strength. He carried a pack over one shoulder and a rifle in his other hand, and everything about him spoke of life lived in wild places. "You are the gravedigger's niece," he said, and it was not a question. "I have seen you in town." "Nadine Walker," she said, lifting her chin despite her appearance. "And you are?" "Logan Lawson," he replied. "I live up in the mountains, trap and hunt, bring pelts and meat down to trade every few weeks." She had heard of him. Mountain men were not uncommon in these parts. But Logan Lawson had a reputation. People said he could track anything, survive anything, that he had lived alone in the high country for 5 years and preferred the company of wolves to people. They said he was dangerous in the way wild things were dangerous, unpredictable and powerful. Looking at him now, Nadine believed every story. "You are covered in dirt," Logan said, and there was something in his voice she could not identify. Not disgust, but something else. Concern, perhaps. "I dig graves for my living," Nadine said sharply. "Dirt is part of the work." Logan set down his pack and his rifle, the movements deliberate. "That creek water is not warm enough to do the job properly," he said. "There is a hot spring about a mile upstream, natural pool, good and warm. Water there would wash you properly clean." Nadine stared at him. "Why would you tell me that?" He looked at her for a long moment, those creek-colored eyes steady. "Because you look like you are carrying the weight of every grave you have ever dug. And maybe if the dirt came off, some of that weight would too." The words hit her harder than they should have. She swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. "I do not know you." "No," Logan agreed. "But I know what it looks like when someone is drowning on dry land. Seen it in myself often enough." He picked up his things. "The spring is upstream, northwest. You follow the creek until you see 3 white stones stacked on top of each other. Path leads off from there. Water is clean and warm, private. Nobody goes there but me." He turned to leave, and Nadine found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "Wait." Logan paused, looked back over his shoulder. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You do not know me." His expression softened just slightly, and for a moment, she saw something beneath the rough exterior, something gentle. "Maybe I am tired of seeing people suffer when there is an easy remedy at hand," he said quietly. "Or maybe I just think someone who spends her days with the dead deserves a moment of comfort." He nodded once. "The offer stands, whether you take it or not." He walked away then, disappearing into the trees with the quiet competence of a man who belonged to the wilderness. And Nadine was left standing by the creek with her heart beating too fast and her mind full of questions. She looked down at her hands, at the dirt that no amount of scrubbing seemed to remove completely, and made a decision. She followed the creek upstream. The walk took longer than she expected, her legs still shaky from the morning's work. But she found the 3 white stones exactly where he said they would be. The path was narrow, almost hidden, winding through aspens and pines until it opened into a clearing. The hot spring sat in the center like a gift from the earth itself. Steam rising from water that shimmered with minerals, surrounded by smooth rocks and wildflowers that painted the clearing in purples and yellows. Nadine stood at the edge and felt something crack inside her chest. She looked around, confirming she was alone, and slowly began to undress. Her fingers fumbled with buttons and laces, her movements stiff with self-consciousness, even though there was no one to see. When she finally stepped into the water, the heat shocked through her, so different from the cold creek. She sank down until the water reached her shoulders and let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 7 years. The water worked its way into her skin, loosening the dirt, the tension, the exhaustion. She scrubbed at herself with her hands, watching the water turn cloudy around her, and kept scrubbing until her skin was pink and clean and her own again. She ducked her head under, soaking her hair, and surfaced to find Logan Lawson standing at the edge of the clearing. Nadine gasped and sank deeper into the water, her arms crossing over her chest even though the spring's milky minerals concealed her. "What are you doing here?" "This is my spring," Logan said simply. He held up a bundle in his hands. "And I brought you clean clothes. Figured yours were beyond saving." Her face burned. "You cannot just watch me bathe." "I am not watching," Logan said. And indeed, his eyes were fixed carefully on the trees beyond the spring. "I am leaving these here and going. but I wanted to make sure you found it all right." He set the bundle on a rock and turned to leave again, but Nadine called out, "Wait." He stopped, his back still to her. "Thank you," she said, and the words felt inadequate for what he had given her. This moment, this cleanliness, this brief reprieve from being the gravedigger's niece. Logan looked back over his shoulder, and when their eyes met, Nadine felt something shift between them. Something that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the way he looked at her, like she was worth looking at. "You are not just dirt and graves," he said quietly. "You should remember that." Then he was gone again, leaving her alone in the spring with clean water and clean clothes and a feeling in her chest like sunrise. When Nadine finally emerged from the spring, her skin scrubbed clean and glowing pink from the heat, she found that Logan had left her a simple dress in a soft blue color, worn but well made, along with undergarments and even a pair of boots that were only slightly too large. The clothes smelled like pine and wood smoke, and when she put them on, they felt like a different life. She gathered her old clothes, though she considered leaving them, and made her way back down the path to the main creek. The sun was lower now, painting the valley in gold, and she knew her uncle would be wondering where she had gone. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not care about his wondering. She found Logan waiting by the creek where she had first encountered him, his pack resting against a tree, his rifle across his knees as he sat on a fallen log. He looked up when she approached, and something in his expression changed. His eyes widened slightly, then softened, and he stood slowly as if she were something that might startle. "You clean up well," he said. But there was none of the teasing she might have expected. Instead, his voice held a note of wonder, like he was seeing something miraculous. "The clothes fit well enough," Nadine said, suddenly shy. "Thank you for them." "They were my sister's," Logan said. "Before she married and moved to Denver, I kept a few of her things, never knew why until now." Nadine looked down at the dress, smoothing the fabric with her clean hands. "I cannot take your sister's clothes. She does not need them, and you do." Logan picked up his pack, slinging it over his shoulder with easy strength. "Besides, that color suits you better than dirt." Nadine felt heat rise in her cheeks again. She was not used to this, to someone noticing her, speaking to her like she was a woman rather than just a pair of hands to dig with. "I should get back before my uncle sends someone looking." "I will walk with you," Logan said. "Getting dark soon, and there are mountain lions in these parts." They walked in silence for a while, Nadine acutely aware of his presence beside her. He was so large that she felt small next to him, though she was not a small woman, standing nearly 5'8" in her bare feet. But Logan made the world feel different, somehow. Safer, despite his wildness. "Why do you live up in the mountains alone?" she asked finally, because the question burned in her mind. Logan was quiet for several steps. "Started during the war," he said. "I fought for 2 years, saw things no man should see. When I came home, I found I could not breathe in towns anymore. Too many people, too much noise. The mountains are quiet, honest. A bear does not pretend to be anything but a bear." "That must be lonely," Nadine said softly. "Sometimes," Logan admitted. "But loneliness in the mountains is cleaner than loneliness in a crowd. At least up there I know why I am alone." Nadine understood that better than she wanted to admit. She had lived in Alamosa for 7 years, and she could count her friends on one hand. People avoided the gravedigger's family, as if death might be contagious. "Do you ever want to live differently?" she asked. Logan glanced at her, and in the fading light, his eyes looked almost luminous. "I did not think I did," he said slowly, "but maybe I just had not found a reason to." The weight of his words settled between them, and Nadine's heart beat faster. She wanted to ask what he meant, but they had reached the edge of town, and she could see her uncle's house in the distance, dark and unwelcoming. "I should go," she said reluctantly. Logan nodded. "I will be in town for a few days, trading my pelts. If you want to visit the spring again, you are welcome any time." "Thank you," Nadine said, "for everything. For seeing me when I thought I was invisible." Something flickered across Logan's face, too quick to name. "You could never be invisible," he said. "You are light, Nadine Walker. Even covered in dirt, you are light. Some people carry darkness, make everything around them darker. But you are the opposite. You dig graves and tend to death, but you still shine." Nadine felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back quickly. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before." "Then people have not been looking properly," Logan said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of still damp hair back from her face. His fingers were calloused, but gentle. "Get some rest. You look like you need it." Then he turned and walked back toward the wilderness, and Nadine stood watching until he disappeared into the growing dark. When she entered her uncle's house, Ezra looked up from his dinner with a scowl. "Where have you been, and where did you get those clothes?" "I went to wash properly at a hot spring," Nadine said, meeting his eyes with new boldness. "And someone kind enough lent me clean clothes since mine were ruined." "You look ridiculous," Ezra said, "like you are pretending to be something you are not." "Maybe I am just remembering what I am," Nadine replied. She went to her small room without another word and closed the door, leaning against it as her heart raced. She looked down at her clean hands, her clean dress, and felt like she had crossed some invisible line from which there was no return. That night, she dreamed of creek-colored eyes and hands strong enough to carry anything. The next morning, Nadine woke before dawn as usual. But instead of feeling the familiar dread of another day spent digging, she felt something else. Anticipation. She dressed in her old work clothes, which she had managed to scrub reasonably clean, and went out to help her uncle with the day's work. 2 new graves needed digging, and the work was as backbreaking as ever. But Nadine found herself humming under her breath as she worked. "What has gotten into you?" Ezra demanded around mid-morning. "You're acting strange." "I am just working," Nadine said innocently. "You are smiling," Ezra said with suspicion. "You never smile." Nadine had not realized she was smiling, but now that he mentioned it, she could feel it on her face. "Maybe I just slept well." Ezra grunted and returned to his work, but Nadine could feel him watching her throughout the day. When they finally finished in the late afternoon, Nadine cleaned up as best she could and made her way into town proper. Alamosa was not large. Its main street lined with a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses. She found Logan at the general store, negotiating with the owner over a stack of beaver pelts. He looked up when she entered, and his face transformed. The hard wariness fell away, replaced by something warm that made Nadine's stomach flutter. "Miss Walker?" he said, formal in front of the store owner. But his eyes said everything else. "Mr. Lawson?" she replied, moving closer to examine his pelts. They were beautiful, thick, and well kept. "These are excellent quality." "I am good at what I do," Logan said, and there was no arrogance in it, just fact. The store owner, a man named Henderson, eyed them both with interest. "You two know each other?" "We met by the creek," Nadine said. "Mr. Lawson showed me where to find a proper place to wash." Henderson's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing more. He returned to examining the pelts, and Logan stepped closer to Nadine, his voice dropping low. "Did you come into town just to see me?" he asked, and there was a hint of hope in the question. "Perhaps," Nadine admitted. "Is that too forward?" "No," Logan said immediately. "It is the best thing that has happened to me in a very long time." He glanced at Henderson, who was carefully pretending not to listen. "I am staying at the hotel for a few nights. Would you have dinner with me tonight? There is a decent enough restaurant next to the saloon." Nadine's heart leaped. "Yes," she said. "I would like that." 7 o'clock? Logan asked. 7 o'clock, Nadine confirmed. She left the store feeling like she was floating, and she hurried home to figure out what she would wear. The blue dress Logan had given her was still clean, and it was by far the nicest thing she owned. She spent the rest of the afternoon washing her hair again, pinning it up in a way that was more refined than her usual simple braid, and trying to calm the nervous excitement that made her hands shake. Ezra was gone when she finally left the house, having headed to the saloon as he did most evenings. And Nadine was grateful not to have to explain herself. She walked to the restaurant with her heart pounding, and found Logan waiting outside, cleaned up and wearing what were clearly his best clothes. His hair was still damp, tied back neatly, and his beard was trimmed closer to his face. He looked like a mountain man, trying to be civilized, and somehow that made him even more appealing. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. "You clean up well yourself," Nadine said, and was rewarded with a rare smile that transformed his entire face. They went inside, and the restaurant owner, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Chen, who had come west from San Francisco, showed them to a small table in the corner. The place was not fancy, but it was clean and warm, and the smells coming from the kitchen made Nadine's stomach rumble. "I cannot remember the last time I ate a meal I did not cook myself," Nadine admitted as they looked at the simple menu. "Then we will make this memorable," Logan said. He ordered steak and potatoes for both of them, along with fresh bread and coffee, and when the food came, it was delicious. They talked while they ate, the conversation flowing more easily than Nadine had expected. Logan told her about life in the mountains, about tracking elk through snow, about the cabin he had built with his own hands, about the silence that was never really silent if you knew how to listen. Nadine told him about her parents, about the influenza that had taken them, about the debt she felt she owed her uncle, even though he had never been kind. "Debt can be paid," Logan said firmly. 7 years of labor is payment enough for anyone. "He took me in when I had nowhere else to go," Nadine said. "And you have given him 7 years of work in return," Logan countered. "That is not a debt anymore. That is imprisonment disguised as family." The words struck deep because they were true. Nadine had never let herself think it so clearly, but hearing Logan say it made something crystallize in her mind. "I do not know how to leave," she admitted quietly. "I have nowhere to go. No money of my own. No skills beyond digging graves." Logan reached across the table and took her hand, his large palm warm and rough and comforting. "You have more skills than you know," he said. "You are strong. You work hard. You do not give up even when the work is brutal. Those are skills that matter." "But what would I do?" Nadine asked. "Where would I go?" Logan was quiet for a moment, his thumb rubbing slow circles on the back of her hand. "I know this is fast," he said finally. "I know we just met yesterday. But I have spent 5 years alone in those mountains. and I have never felt as alive as I did yesterday when I saw you by the creek. When I washed away the dirt and saw you underneath, I felt like I was seeing something I did not know I had been looking for. Nadine's breath caught. What are you saying? I am saying that I have a cabin in the mountains, Logan said, his eyes locked on hers. It is small but solid. I have everything I need to survive, and I could teach you to live up there too. I am saying that if you wanted to leave your uncle, you would have somewhere to go, someone to go to. He paused. I am saying that I want you to consider staying with me. The words hung in the air between them, and Nadine felt like the world had tilted. You are asking me to live with you? She said, needing to be clear. In the mountains? I am asking you to give me a chance, Logan said. To give us a chance. I know it is unconventional, and I know people will talk. But I do not care about people, Nadine. I care about you, about the light I see in you that should not be buried in graves and dirt. Nadine stared at him, this mountain man who had appeared in her life like something from a story, and felt the answer rising in her chest. I would have to think about it, she said. But even as she spoke, she knew what her answer would be. Think all you need, Logan said. I will be in town for 3 more days. But Nadine, I want you to know something. He squeezed her hand gently. I am not asking you to be my housekeeper or my convenience. I am asking because when I look at you, I see someone I could build a life with, someone I could love, if you would let me. Tears pricked Nadine's eyes again, and this time she let them fall. No one has ever wanted me before, she whispered. Not like this. Then everyone else was a fool, Logan said fiercely. Because you are worth wanting. Worth everything. They finished their meal in a charged silence, and when Logan walked her home, he stopped at the end of her uncle's property and pulled her close. He was so much larger than her that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt safe, protected, cherished. Can I kiss you? Logan asked, his hands resting gently on her waist. Yes, Nadine breathed. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and then his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative. But when Nadine pressed closer, wrapping her arms around his neck, it deepened. Logan kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and intensity, and Nadine felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Logan rested his forehead against hers. Think about it, he said again. But know that I meant every word. I will, Nadine promised. She went inside in a daze, her lips still tingling, her heart racing so fast she thought it might burst. She lay in her small bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about mountains and cabins and a man who looked at her like she was light. By morning, her decision was made. Nadine waited until after breakfast to tell her uncle. Ezra was sitting at the table, eating the eggs she had cooked, when she said, I am leaving. He looked up sharply. What? I am leaving, Nadine repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. I have paid my debt to you for taking me in. 7 years is enough. Ezra's face darkened. You ungrateful girl. I gave you a home when you had nothing. And I gave you 7 years of labor, Nadine said. We are even. You have nowhere to go, Ezra said. You will come crawling back within a week. I have somewhere to go, Nadine said. And I will not be coming back. She went to her room and packed the few things she owned into a small bag. The blue dress Logan had given her, a few other worn pieces of clothing, a book her mother had given her before she died, and a locket with her parents' pictures. It all fit easily, a testament to how little she had accumulated in her 21 years. When she came back out, Ezra was waiting. "This is about that mountain man, is it not?" he demanded. "I heard you were seen having dinner with him. You are going to throw away everything for some wild man you do not even know." "I know enough," Nadine said. "I know he treats me with more kindness in 2 days than you have shown me in 7 years. I know he sees me as a person, not just a tool for digging." "He will use you and discard you," Ezra said viciously. "Men like that do not want wives. They want conveniences." "That is not true," Nadine said, but doubt flickered in her chest. "You will see," Ezra said. "And when you do not come crying to me." Nadine walked out without another word, her bag clutched in her hand, her heart pounding with fear and excitement in equal measure. She found Logan at the hotel, and when she appeared in the doorway, his face lit up like sunrise. "You came," he said, standing quickly. "I am coming with you," Nadine said, "if the offer still stands." Logan crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet. "The offer stands," he said against her hair. "It will always stand." They left Alamosa that afternoon, Logan leading the way up into the mountains with Nadine following behind. The path was steep and winding, through aspens and pines that grew denser as they climbed. Logan was patient, stopping frequently to let Nadine rest, pointing out landmarks and animal tracks, teaching her to read the wilderness the way he did. "See those scratches on that tree?" he said, pointing to deep gouges in the bark. "Bear marking his territory. We will stay clear of this area for a while." "How can you tell how old the marks are?" Nadine asked, fascinated despite her nervousness. "The color of the wood underneath," Logan explained. "Fresh scratches are lighter, almost white. These have darkened, which means they are at least a few weeks old." They walked for hours, and Nadine felt her legs burning, her lungs straining in the thinner mountain air. But she did not complain. She had made her choice, and she would see it through. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and purples, they crested a ridge, and Logan said, "There it is." Nadine looked down into a small valley carved between 2 peaks and saw a cabin nestled beside a stream. It was small but well built, with a stone chimney and a covered porch, surrounded by wildflowers and tall grass. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Nadine realized Logan must have left a fire burning before he came down to town. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It is home," Logan said. "And now it is your home too, if you want it." They descended into the valley, and as they got closer, Nadine could see the care Logan had put into the place. The logs were tightly fitted, the roof solid, the porch swept clean. There was a small garden beside the cabin, and she could see a shed and a smokehouse nearby. "You built all of this yourself?" she asked. "Took me 2 years, Logan said, "but I had nothing but time." Inside, the cabin was simple but cozy. 1 large room with a stone fireplace, a bed in one corner covered with furs, a table and 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and a small kitchen area. A ladder led up to a loft where Logan stored extra furs and equipment. "It is not much," Logan said, suddenly uncertain. "I know you are probably used to better." Nadine looked around at the cabin, at the fire crackling in the hearth, at the clean swept floors and the wildflowers in a jar on the table, and felt emotion swell in her chest. "It is perfect," she said. "It is the most perfect thing I have ever seen." Logan exhaled in relief. "I am glad you think so." He set down his pack. "You can have the bed. I will sleep on the floor until we figure out sleeping arrangements." Nadine felt heat rise in her cheeks. They had not discussed the practical details of living together, and suddenly the reality of the situation hit her. She was alone in a cabin in the mountains with a man she barely knew, no matter how much she might be drawn to him. Logan seemed to sense her thoughts. "I will not pressure you into anything," he said quietly. "You are safe here, Nadine. I meant what I said. I want to build a life with you, and that means taking the time to do things properly." "What does properly mean up here?" Nadine asked. "There is no preacher for miles." "No," Logan agreed. "But I have heard that in these mountains, when two people choose each other, that is marriage enough. We could speak our own vows, make our own promises. And when we make it down to a town with a preacher, we could make it official if you want." Nadine considered this. The idea appealed to her, the thought of making promises just between them, without her uncle or curious townspeople watching. "I would like that," she said softly. Logan's expression softened. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel rushed." "I feel many things," Nadine said, stepping closer to him. "Nervous, excited, scared, hopeful. But I do not feel rushed. I feel like I have been waiting my whole life to find this, to find you. And now that I have, I do not want to waste time." Logan reached out and cupped her face in his large, calloused hands. "Then let us do it properly," he said. "Let us speak our vows tonight, and mean them with everything we have." As the fire crackled and the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Logan and Nadine stood facing each other in the middle of the cabin. Logan took her hands in his, dwarfing them with his size, and spoke first. "I promise to protect you, to provide for you, to treat you with the respect and care you deserve. I promise to see you always, to never let you become invisible again. I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as I live." Nadine felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears, clean tears. "I promise to stand beside you, to learn your ways and share your life. I promise to bring light to our home, to never let the darkness win. I promise to love you fiercely and truly, to be your partner in everything for as long as I live." Logan pulled her close and kissed her deeply, and Nadine felt like she was being washed clean all over again. Not of dirt this time, but of all the years of loneliness and invisibility. When he lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bed, she went willingly, ready to begin this new life in truth. That night, Logan loved her with the same intensity he brought to everything, and Nadine discovered that she was not just light to him, but fire, burning bright and hot and alive. They came together like forces of nature, and when they finally slept, tangled together under the furs, Nadine felt more whole than she ever had in her life. The next months passed in a blur of learning and growing. Logan taught Nadine how to survive in the mountains, how to read weather signs and track animals, how to fish in the stream and tend the garden. She learned to shoot his rifle, to skin rabbits and cure hides, to make soap and candles from animal fat. The work was hard, harder than digging graves in some ways. But it was different because she was working for herself, for them, building something rather than burying things. Logan was a patient teacher, never mocking when she made mistakes, always ready with encouragement. And he was a devoted husband in all the ways that mattered. He made sure she ate well, that she stayed warm, that she knew every day how much he valued her. He told her stories by the fire at night, about his childhood in Missouri before the war, about his time as a soldier, about the day he decided to leave civilization behind. "I thought I would die up here alone," he admitted one night as they lay together. I thought that was what I wanted. But I was wrong. I was not looking for death. I was looking for life, and I just did not know it until I found you." Nadine kissed him, tasting the truth of his words. "I was buried alive down there," she said, "surrounded by death, becoming it myself. You pulled me out. You gave me life back." As summer turned to autumn, the mountains transformed into a riot of gold and red. Logan took Nadine on long walks, showing her the hidden places he had discovered in his years alone. They found a meadow full of late-blooming wildflowers, a waterfall that fell from a cliff into a crystal pool, a cave where they took shelter during an unexpected storm, and made love while rain pounded outside. In October, Logan went on a hunting trip to bring down an elk for winter meat, and Nadine stayed behind to preserve the vegetables from the garden. She was working in the kitchen when she felt a wave of nausea hit her so hard she had to sit down. It passed after a few minutes, but over the next days it kept returning, always in the morning. By the time Logan returned, dragging a massive elk he had field-dressed, Nadine was fairly certain she knew what the nausea meant. "I think I am pregnant," she told him that night, nervous about his reaction. Logan froze, his eyes going wide. "You are certain?" "Fairly certain," Nadine said. "I have missed my monthly courses, and the morning sickness is quite distinctive." For a moment, Logan just stared at her, and Nadine felt fear creep in. They had not discussed children, had not planned for this, even though it was an obvious possibility given their life together. Then Logan's face split into the biggest smile Nadine had ever seen. He crossed the room and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are going to be a mother, and I am going to be a father." "You are happy?" Nadine asked, relief flooding through her. "Happy does not cover it," Logan said. He set her down gently, as if she were made of glass. "I am terrified and thrilled and amazed all at once. We are going to be a family, Nadine. A real family." He knelt down and pressed his face against her still flat stomach, and Nadine felt tears slip down her cheeks. This was what she had not known she wanted, had not dared to hope for. Not just a husband, but a family, a life that was fully hers. The winter was hard, as winters in the Colorado mountains always were. Snow fell heavy and deep, sealing them into their valley for weeks at a time. But Logan had prepared well, and they had plenty of food, plenty of firewood, plenty of furs to keep them warm. Nadine's belly grew steadily, and Logan treated her like she was the most precious thing in the world, always making sure she was comfortable, always ready to rub her aching back or fetch her whatever she needed. He made a cradle by the fire, carving it from aspen wood and sanding it smooth. He fashioned tiny clothes from soft rabbit fur and deerskin. He talked to her belly every night, telling their unborn child stories about the mountains and promises about the life they would have. "I will teach you to track and hunt," he said one night, his hand spread across Nadine's stomach. "I will show you all the secret places in these mountains, and I will make sure you know, every single day, that you are loved beyond measure." "What if it is a girl?" Nadine asked, amused. "Will you still teach her to hunt?" "Especially if it is a girl," Logan said firmly. "Any child of ours will know how to survive, how to be strong. Boy or girl does not matter." Nadine loved him even more for that. In April, when the snow was finally melting and the first green shoots were appearing, Nadine went into labor. She had been dreading this moment, terrified of giving birth so far from any doctor or midwife. But Logan was calm and steady. He had helped birth calves and foals, and while he admitted a human baby was different, he was confident he could help her through it. The labor was long and brutal, lasting through the night and into the next day. Nadine screamed and cried and cursed, and Logan never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her face, encouraging her with every contraction. "You are strong," he kept saying. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." When the baby finally came in a rush of blood and fluid, Logan caught him with practiced hands and let out a whoop of joy. "It is a boy," he announced, cutting the cord and wrapping the baby in soft furs. "We have a son, Nadine." He placed the baby on Nadine's chest, and she looked down at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the perfect little fingers that gripped her thumb, and fell utterly in love. "He is beautiful," she whispered, exhausted and exhilarated. "He is perfect." "He looks like you," Logan said, sitting beside them on the bed, wrapping an arm around Nadine's shoulders. "He has your eyes." They named him Nathan, which meant gift from God, because that was what he felt like. A gift they had not known to ask for, but that had been given anyway. Those first months with Nathan were exhausting and wonderful. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with a lusty cry that echoed through the valley when he was hungry or wet. Logan was a devoted father, always ready to hold his son, to walk him when he was fussy, to sing him mountain songs in his deep voice. Nadine watched her husband with their child and felt her heart expand. This man, who had seemed so wild and dangerous when she first met him, was tender and patient with their baby. He made Nathan laugh with silly faces, changed his diapers without complaint, and rocked him to sleep with a gentleness that belied his size and strength. As spring turned to summer, they settled into a rhythm as a family. Nadine regained her strength and returned to her work in the garden and around the cabin, often with Nathan tied to her back in a sling Logan fashioned from soft leather. The baby seemed to love being outside, cooing at the trees and the birds, falling asleep to the sound of the stream. In July, Logan said, "I think we should go down to Alamosa, get Nathan officially recorded, and maybe see about making our marriage official with a preacher, if you still want that." Nadine felt a flutter of nervousness at the thought of returning, but she agreed. They packed carefully, making sure they had everything Nathan would need for the journey, and set out on a clear morning. The trip took 2 days with the baby, and they camped one night under the stars. Nathan seemed fascinated by the campfire, watching the flames with wide eyes, and Nadine felt a fierce pride in how well her son was adapting to mountain life. When they finally reached Alamosa, Nadine was struck by how small it seemed now, how crowded and noisy. She had grown accustomed to the quiet of the mountains, the space, the clean air. But she walked beside Logan with her head held high, Nathan in her arms, and met the stares of townspeople with calm confidence. They found a preacher at the small church, and he agreed to marry them officially, though he pursed his lips in disapproval when he learned they had been living as husband and wife for nearly a year already and had a child. "We spoke our own vows," Logan said firmly, "but we wanted to make it legal in the eyes of the law." The ceremony was brief and perfunctory, with 2 strangers pulled in from the street to serve as witnesses. But when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Logan kissed Nadine like it was the first time, and she felt the significance of the moment. They were officially bound now, in every way that mattered. They recorded Nathan's birth at the town hall, and then Logan said, "Do you want to see your uncle?" Nadine thought about it and shook her head. "No," she said. "That part of my life is over. I have no need to revisit it." They stayed one night at the hotel, a luxury Nathan seemed to appreciate even if he did not understand it, and then headed back to the mountains. Nadine felt relief when they left the town behind, when the trees closed around them and the air grew cleaner. This was home now, not Alamosa. The years that followed were good ones, full of work and love and laughter. Nathan grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious boy, always wanting to follow his father on his trap lines, always asking questions about everything. Logan taught him patiently, showing him how to move quietly through the forest, how to read tracks, how to respect the wilderness. When Nathan was 3, Nadine became pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, knowing what to expect, and the labor was shorter. Their second child was a girl, born in the middle of a warm August night, with red hair like Nadine's mother and lungs that could wake the dead. They named her Nora, and she was the opposite of her calm brother in every way. Where Nathan had been content to watch and learn, Nora was always moving, always demanding attention, always getting into things she should not touch. Logan adored her, calling her his little wildcat, and she wrapped him around her finger from the first moment. 2 years later came another boy, Lewis, who was quiet and thoughtful like Nathan, but with his father's size even as a baby. Logan joked that he would be 7 feet tall by the time he was grown, and Nadine believed him. Life in the mountains was not always easy. There were hard winters when supplies ran low, summers when drought made the garden struggle, times when sickness came despite their isolation. When Nathan was 6, he broke his arm falling from a tree, and Logan had to set it with Nadine's help while the boy screamed. When Nora was 4, she ate some berries she should not have, and was violently ill for 2 days, and Nadine barely slept, terrified they would lose her. But through all of it, they had each other. Logan was Nadine's rock, steady and strong, always ready with solutions to problems. And Nadine brought light to their home, just as Logan had said she would. She taught the children to read from the few books they had, told them stories about their grandparents, sang them songs her mother had taught her. She made the cabin a home, filled with warmth and love, despite its remoteness. As the children grew, Logan began taking longer trips down to Alamosa to trade, sometimes bringing the children with him so they could see civilization, experience the world beyond their valley. Nathan loved these trips, fascinated by the town and the people. But Nora always complained that it was too noisy, and Lewis usually got overwhelmed and wanted to go home. When Nathan turned 10, he asked, "Do you think we will always live here, in the mountains?" Logan looked at Nadine, letting her answer. "That depends," she said. "Do you want to live somewhere else?" Nathan considered carefully. "I like it here," he said. "But sometimes I wonder what it would be like to live in a town, to go to a real school, to have friends my age." Nadine felt a pang at that. She knew their children's isolation was a sacrifice they had made for the life she and Logan had chosen. "When you are older," she said, "if you decide you want to live differently, we will help you do that. Your father and I chose this life, but that does not mean you have to. But you would be sad if I left," Nathan said perceptively. "I would miss you terribly," Nadine admitted. "But I would also be happy that you were finding your own path. That is what parents want, for their children to be happy." Logan reached over and ruffled Nathan's hair. "You have years yet before you need to decide," he said. "For now, just enjoy being a boy." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Nathan grew tall and strong like his father, becoming a skilled hunter and tracker. Nora developed her mother's determination and her father's love of the wilderness, always pushing boundaries and testing limits. Lewis remained quiet and observant, but he had a gift with animals, able to gentle even the wildest creatures. When Nadine was 35, she had one final pregnancy, a surprise baby who came 12 years after Lewis. Another girl, whom they named Lily, who was sweet and gentle from the start. Logan, now 42, joked that he was too old to be starting over with a baby. But Nadine saw how he melted every time Lily smiled at him. By the time Lily was 5, Nathan was 20 and had decided to leave the mountains. He wanted to go to Denver, to try his hand at city life, to see what the world offered beyond the peaks and valleys. It broke Nadine's heart to watch him go, but she hugged him tight and made him promise to write. "I will come visit," Nathan assured her. "This is still home. It will always be home. But I need to see what else is out there." "I know," Nadine said, even as tears streamed down her face. "I know, and I am proud of you for being brave enough to try." Logan rode down to Alamosa with Nathan, making sure his son had enough money to start his new life. And when he came back alone, Nadine saw the sadness in his eyes. But he held her that night and said, "We raised him well. He is ready for this." "I know," Nadine whispered, "but it still hurts." "It does," Logan agreed. "But that is the price of loving someone, is it not? The possibility of this pain is worth all the joy that came before." Nora left 2 years later, but she did not go to the city. Instead, she married a rancher's son she met on one of their trips to town, a young man named Thomas, who was as wild as she was. They settled on a ranch a day's ride from Alamosa, and Nadine took comfort in knowing her daughter was still relatively close. Lewis stayed, showing no interest in leaving the mountains. He built his own small cabin a mile from theirs when he turned 21, wanting his own space, but not wanting to be far from his family. He made his living guiding hunters and trappers through the mountains, his knowledge and skill with animals making him sought after. And Lily, their surprise baby, grew up with the mountains in her blood even more than her siblings. She was fearless and capable, learning everything her father could teach her, and Nadine knew she would never leave. When Nadine turned 45 and Logan was 52, they found themselves with an empty nest again, as Lewis had married a quiet woman from town and moved into his cabin with her. And Lily was spending more time with a young trapper who had settled nearby. "It is just us again," Nadine said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the peaks. "Like the beginning," Logan said, reaching for her hand. His hair was more gray than brown now, and his beard was shot through with silver. But his eyes were still that same creek watercolor that had captured her all those years ago. "Do you have any regrets?" Nadine asked. "About the life we chose?" Logan turned to look at her fully, and the love in his eyes was as strong as it had been when they first met. "Not a single one," he said firmly. "You are still light, Nadine. You have filled our home, our children, my life with light for 30 years. How could I possibly regret that?" Nadine felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. "You washed me clean," she said softly. "You saw me when I was invisible, and you made me believe I was worth something." "You were always worth everything," Logan said. He pulled her close, and she fit against him the way she always had, like they were made for this. "You were worth leaving civilization for, worth building this life for. You and our children are the best things that ever happened to me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The mountains rose around them, familiar and eternal, and Nadine felt a deep sense of peace. This life had not been easy, but it had been good, rich, full of love and purpose and meaning. "I used to dig graves," she said eventually. "I used to spend my days with death, and I thought that was all there was for me. And now? Logan asked. Now I spend my days with life, Nadine said. With you, with our children and grandchildren, with these mountains that never stop growing and changing. You gave me that, Logan. You pulled me from the grave and showed me how to live. Logan kissed her forehead. We gave that to each other, he corrected. I was half dead up here before you came, just surviving instead of living. You brought me back to life too. They grew old together in those mountains, their bodies slowing but their love never dimming. Nathan visited from Denver every summer, bringing his wife and children. Nora came with her growing brood of wild ranch children. Lewis and his wife lived close enough to visit often, and Lily eventually married her trapper and built a cabin just down the valley, wanting to raise her own children inside of her parents' home. Grandchildren filled the valley with noise and laughter, learning to track and hunt and survive the way their parents had. Nadine and Logan taught them all, passing down the knowledge and skills that had sustained their family for decades. When Logan turned 70, his body finally started to fail him. The hard life in the mountains had taken its toll, and he moved slower, struggled more. But his mind stayed sharp, and his love for Nadine never wavered. I have had a good life, he told her one night as they lay together, his arm around her, her head on his chest. Better than I ever deserved. Do not talk like that, Nadine said, though she knew he was right to be thinking of the end. They were both old now, their bodies worn from years of hard work and mountain living. I am not afraid, Logan said. How can I be afraid when I have lived such a full life? When I have loved you and been loved by you? Nadine felt tears slip down her cheeks. I am afraid, she admitted. I am afraid of losing you. You will never lose me, Logan said firmly. I will be in these mountains, in our children, in every sunrise over the peaks. And when your time comes, I will be waiting. We will walk these mountains together again, just like we did in the beginning. Logan Lawson died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, with Nadine holding his hand and their children gathered around. They buried him in a meadow overlooking the valley, under the aspens he had loved, and Nadine read a passage from Psalms that talked about mountains and strength and refuge. After the burial, as their children tried to convince her to come stay with one of them, Nadine shook her head. This is my home, she said. This is where I belong. I will stay here where I can feel him around me. They worried but respected her wishes, and Lily moved back into the cabin to stay with her, not wanting her mother to be alone. Nadine lived 4 more years after Logan's death, and though she missed him with an ache that never fully eased, she was not unhappy. She spent her days in the valley they had made their own, tending the garden, watching the seasons change, playing with her many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the man who had been big and strong and gentle, who had seen light in a girl covered in dirt and had washed her clean. He said I was light, she told them, and he spent his whole life making sure I knew it was true. When Nadine died quietly in her sleep at 75, surrounded by family, they buried her beside Logan in the aspen meadow. Their children stood together, no longer children, but grown people with children and grandchildren of their own, and they spoke of how their parents had built something beautiful from nothing, had created a legacy of love and strength that would echo through generations. Nathan, now 55 and gray-haired himself, said, they found each other when they both needed saving, and they saved each other every single day after that. It was the perfect epitaph for a love that had started with a simple act of kindness by a creek and had grown into a family, a home, a life well lived. The mountain man and the gravedigger's niece, who had washed each other clean and had built a light so bright it still shone in their children's eyes. The valley remained in the family for generations, passed down from parent to child, each one adding their own stories to the legacy. But the original cabin stood as a testament, carefully preserved, where grandchildren and great-grandchildren came to hear the story of how it all began, of how she had been covered in dirt, digging graves, invisible and forgotten, of how he had been alone in the mountains, surviving but not living, of how they had found each other and had built something that lasted far beyond their own lives, of how he had washed her clean and told her she was light, and how she had believed him, and in believing had made it true.